Hello everyone. So today I am making this video as a vlog video just to share a bit some stuff that I've been doing and learning recently as a software developer. So I am actually trying my best to stay with the to stay up to date with the current standards, the latest standards and the new technologies that are coming. And to be honest, it's so, I won't say overwhelming, but they are, especially in the JavaScript world, for example, there is like a new stuff, a new shiny tool coming up every single day. So I think that it's important in this particular aspect to be able to unlearn and learn. So sometimes what I do, I try to keep maybe 20-25 minutes per week just to understand what's next, what's coming into the market, and maybe I also try to see if it's relevant to my life as a developer or maybe something else. Like, for example, maybe in 4, 5 years, this technology will be relevant. So, for example, a couple of years ago, we started hearing a lot about data science, and eventually now maybe they're starting to have more prospect in the country I am, Mauritius, but it depends. Even if you don't work professionally on data, you can always use machine learning to build your own data set, for example, and then make it applicable, or rather fine tune your data in your scenario. For example, you want to build a, let's say you are in barrister in Mauritius and you want to have some questions based on Mauritius in terms of law and things like that. And I think normally what you will do, like a barrister already knows his or her stuff. But let's say you want to get some data very quickly. So how do you do that? It's very simple. Well, if you use the machine learning, like generative AI stuff, you just put your data in there and you train it, you fine tune it rather, you use an existing data set. Then you add your documents, your endless amount of document, and then you fine tune it with it, or you can actually even use this as data, but you need certain models. So of course, explaining all of this is not in the scope of this blog. But recently I've been reading a lot more on caching. So I'm not only talking about server-side caching or using a DNS like Cloudflare for caching, but I'm also thinking about how your browser cache certain pages, especially if they don't change often, like static pages. And whenever you are using a technology like Next, Nux, Astro, and so on and so forth, so you can build the page to become static, and then it's very fast because your browser can cache it. And that's why I'm also looking at some good practices with these technologies. For example, um, let's say you want to cache, let's say you have a website and you have lots of data coming from different database or API providers. So if you're going to wait for each and every one to appear, that's going to be an issue. That's going to take a lot of time. So what you want to do is, there are so many ways to do that. You can use lazy loading. You can load parts of it. You can use SSL normally, server-side rendering. You can render some part already. For example, if you're going to be using skeleton loading. So if you don't know what it is, very interesting. LinkedIn uses it, and Facebook as well, and many others actually. So before the data is loaded, you see there's progress bar in each of the divs or structure, the HTML, the page structure, whereby it's going to be loaded at the data. So that's interesting as well, for sure. But in terms of really caching, how to make your application go faster. So once you've got the data, at least part of the data, you cache it, if the data is not going to change a lot. So let me give you an example. Let's say in the database you are going to be using for your dashboard materialized views. That is that the difference between a view and a materialized view, at least in Postgres, is that when you make a view, it's just a bunch of select and they return you the data. And it's not saved anywhere. With materialized view, it is. The data is actually saved. So it's much faster to retrieve them, especially if you have a lot of tables, a huge query, it's much easier. But the problem is that it might not be up to date. There is a way to do it. So basically, you can use cron job, but until you run the materialized view function to reload, it isn't reloaded. But if you use this, you're going to get your data faster. That's one, in your database. And second, you can use, so in terms of caching, you can use Memo because it's not going to change a lot. Use Memo in, for example, React and Next, but other frameworks also have their technology, so that can be a good thing as well. So I'm just looking at some of these. Some of the common knowledge. Another one from NDN WebDoc, so it's the Mozilla developer, is concerning progressive web apps. A caching strategy is an algorithm for when to cache a resource, when to serve a resource, and when to get the resource from the network. Another answer from Cora: what is the role of caching in web development? Have tendency to say caching. Caching involves storing copies of frequently accessed data in a location closer to the user or the application, making subsequent requests faster. Of course, you can use other caching software or process. For example, Redis is very popular in Ruby on Rails, and I imagine many of the such web technologies. So that's really good. In front of me, I have the a project that I'm just having a look at work, and I'm trying to think if we first and foremost, I think I need to. I'm just thinking. I think I need to install some stuff. By stuff, I mean some extension. And let me also change my font because I don't really like the default font most of the time. And where is it? So I can't really see stuff going on right now. So allow me to just change my font in a moment. I really enjoy using a different type of font. Yeah. Okay. For example, if you're using Mac, I think the default one is Menlo, and there's San Francisco, but I don't really know how to use it. It should appear by default. And so right now I'm just having a look at a code, at a file that's been built in Python, and immediately you have Visual Studio Code that is asking me or showing recommendations for the different extensions that I might need for Python. For example, right now I have in front of me the Python language, and of course it will ask me about the formatter, which I think is important if you're using Python. And you can just use it with Prettier. I'm not sure if Prettier works fine with Prettier, works with Python. So I'm asking Copilot chat for this answer. Let's see. So it's no. So Prettier does not officially support Python. Prettier is a code formatter that supports languages like JavaScript, TypeScript, CSS, HTML, and JSON. Yeah, I think Prettier is just for the web. I mean the front end especially, but if you're using TypeScript at the back, so it will support it. For Python, you might want to use tools like Black or Autopep 8, which are specifically designed for Python code formatting. So yeah, it's just plug and play. You install Black or Autopep 8. I think Autopep is more popular. I'm not sure. I've used Black before. And I've used both actually. And then the thing is, you just add your VS Code formatter. You just, I think the settings, you just mention which one you want, and it's going to work fine. There's absolutely no problem. So let's say you add some spaces because Python is, for example, indentation-based language. So you add some spaces. When you save your codes, it's going to save automatically. So right now I'm just looking a bit at some codes, and yeah, I think it's nice codes to see. I'm just missing some better extension, which is going to improve on the syntax highlighting. Right now, there's not much syntax highlighting. So whenever I also work on a new project, what I like doing is I start first by reading I start with the README file. Okay, it gives me an idea of the technology used. For example, let's say I'm working on a technology that uses Django on the back, the front end maybe Vue.js. So the Django is just the API, so I read the README file. But of course, it can be possible that your README file doesn't have enough, and then it's going to be a problem. Enough information about the installation, the packages, and technologies, then you need to figure all of that by yourself. So right now, for example, I'm reading the README file, gives me the prerequisites and how to set up it, and then of course I need to add a environment variables file, and I run it, and that's it. I think it's pretty good. And of course, apart from that, what I like doing next is looking at the project library for the package JSON or the requirements.txt, depending on the language that you are using. Okay, so right now I get an idea about the dependencies, the dependencies, and let's say, for example, I see that I don't know. Right now, it seems as if I know most of the dependencies. At least I know what they do. But a good tip that you may want to apply when you are working on any type of project, if you've not already done so, of course, is to read the package or requirements or composer.json. And if you're seeing, or if you're using bundle, for example, gem file, look for some libraries or frameworks, or most probably some packages that you don't know, and just copy and paste on Google, or you can just do so with Copilot and try to understand what it does. Because many times, if you don't do so, there will be some stuff happening, especially when you're using dependencies or like your libraries that you do your work. For example, a UI library that you don't know, and maybe it uses another visual pattern. For example, with Tailwind CSS, if you're not used to it, it can at least initially appear strange with all these classes. But if you just research about it, and of course, when you start using it, it will make sense for sure. So let me take an example during this vlog. I don't know there's Tailwind in it. Okay, so let's say I don't know what is auto prefixer. So from here, I double click on it. I ask Copilot here, explain this. Explain what is auto prefixer in a package.json file. So what is it? The active selection you've provided is auto prefixer. This tool is often used in web development. So auto prefixer is a post-processor for CSS. It uses data from CanIUse, a website that provides up-to-date browser support tables for front-end web development to automatically add vendor prefixes to your CSS. These vendor prefixes are needed. So it's basically adding vendor prefixes like WebKit, most MS, because when you write a CSS rule using a property that is not fully supported in all browsers, so auto prefixer will add the necessary vendor prefixes. So this is a good thing as well. So that's one of the examples that you do. And other thing is, let's say you are working in the technology Django, for example. What you want to also do is look for the best practices. If you don't want to do so, it's no problem, as long as you have Copilot or any ChatGPT or Claude with you. You just ask, okay, for this library or framework, what are the best practices? And you try to understand everything in it. Of course, it might not make sense the first time you do so, but it's no problem. So once you've done that, okay. And now the second thing to do, in my opinion, is look for some common mistakes to avoid. So let's try it myself. What are some common mistakes to avoid with this library, with this framework? So I've asked this copilot, let's say what is the answer. It's quite interesting. So one of the very important, irrespective of the framework that you're going to use for web, you need to, at the very least, optimize your routing or make it as simple as possible. Because if you're routing the route when you enter something in your browser or page, a URL, it gives you the page. So having the proper concept for the routing is important because you want to make it as simple as possible and you don't want to write stuff. I'll give you an example on the project that I've worked before. And some part of the project, the author, the programmer, what he did was that he written some logic which is very complex because it was not properly documented and it's based on a certain stuff that happens, certain data that you pass through the URL. I can't really remember the complexity, but it was very, very complex. And another colleague later shared this story with us that he could actually use the default routing practices to do it, and it would be far simpler. But of course, there was something to adapt to it. But this person didn't have to write the whole additional logic for that. That's one thing. Another thing is, of course, you want to keep your packages and extensions that you use for your framework up to date. That's very important. And you want to optimize content like images wherever possible. And for example, your route, your errors, handle your errors properly. And I would also suggest that if you are building an API, you don't trust the data from the front end blindly because you might be in for some surprises. So that's very important to do. There are a lot of mechanism or a lot of sanitization techniques to do that. So that's not a problem at all. And in fact, also something that you will notice with all of these frameworks is that they have some certain quirks, some special stuff based maybe on the language that they do that is a bit more specific. So make sure to learn about that. For example, in Ruby, we have the concept of metaprogramming, whereby you treat the codes as data, so you can do some stuff with the data. In short, it's basically like a reflector, annotation reflector algorithm, or how you say that, the process in TypeScript or C#, so it's almost the same thing, but of course, metaprogramming, for example, gives you much more. You can even call a private method from a class without actually having any kind of access, because that's a method. A private method shouldn't be accessible, but with Ruby you can do certain stuff, and maybe it's not. You might think if you're deep into object-oriented programming, this is a bad practice in terms of access modifiers, but the thing is sometimes it can be very helpful. So that is, I think, nothing more for this short blog for today. At least I'm hoping to do more, to record more videos about the process, about being a developer, about coding, about programming, learning especially. It's very important how to read code, how to read documentation, and of course how to be productive, because if you can do something in a couple of hours of the day, why spend the whole day or even 2 days to do the same thing? Because there are ways to do most of the job as a web developer or even a programmer Generally speaking, there are some ways to do stuff much faster, but it always depends on how the different strategies that you use and so on and so forth. So let's continue that later.